So we think of Buzzfeed as a media company. We're a social news and entertainment company. And what that really means is that we've grown a very large audience, primarily by making content that people are going to share, which means they're sharing it mostly on social services in the US like Facebook and Twitter. I think we're building a media company that we hope is going to be around for a very long time, but we started as a startup. And when I first came to Buzzfeed, it really was a lab for viral content. We were trying to figure out why do people share certain things and not others. I wouldn't say that what we did then was journalism. Doing news gathering is fairly new to Buzzfeed. So for the early years, we were trying to understand the social web, why, again, why people share things with their friends, what sorts of things they share, where they're sharing them. And in 2011, this interesting thing started happening on the social web in the US where initially people would mostly share lighthearted content, pictures of their kids or their dogs, but they were starting to share news at a really high volume. And Buzzfeed had no news gathering organization. We didn't have any reporters. So we brought in an editor-in-chief who had a background in politics in the US and really focused on the 2012 election, and that's when we got into doing news. So the organization has really changed from being this very experimental, sort of test-oriented place that was a mixture of editorial and technology, which we still are, but to adding to that a real news component. Yeah, I think the fundamental difference, the key difference between the way that Buzzfeed looks at distribution and print or TV or radio is that we think of our audience also as a part of the distribution model. So instead of having to, have a tower that's broadcasting or have access to cable or a printing press that then has to be sent out to people, we think of our readers as our primary distribution model. So that people come to Buzzfeed, they find something interesting, and it's so interesting that they need to share it and pass it on with their friends. So we really look at the redistribution rate, the sort of viral rate that sharing happens on Buzzfeed as the key way to grow our audience. Typically, you have to choose between being a platform and being a content provider. For a while, Buzzfeed was sort of on the fence about that. In the early days of the site, when we were still in this very experimental mode, we have a very large technology team. Everything at Buzzfeed is proprietary. We have our own platform, our own CMS, our own advertising platform. And we weren't sure if we would be sort of a user-generated platform that's a little bit more similar to Twitter or a media company that's more like the New York Times. We've definitely gone in that direction. I think for us it was a good move because the proposition that we offer to advertisers is both that we have this large platform with a lot of viewers coming to it, and we have a real expertise in creating content that people share on the web. But I think that certainly for Facebook, for Twitter, for YouTube, they've had to make a decision about which side of that line they want to go on, and they've definitely gone towards focusing on being a platform where other content can sort of filter through. We're very excited about content. We've now invested very heavily in it and grown a very large editorial team, which is unusual in media, or at least unusual in the crossover between media and venture funding. But I think it's been really successful for us. Yeah. So our overall strategy is to, rather than have a series of sort of siloed sites that are related but independent, to build a network of global sites for Buzzfeed. We want our news to be able to move from the US to international markets, and from international markets to the US, from international markets back and forth between each other as well. The way that we've focused on growth so far has been to go to really the global cultural capitals in the world. Those are places we think that Buzzfeed can be successful, that we can hire talented writers. And we've tried to sort of recreate the initial conditions of Buzzfeed, starting with a very small team, focused on really shareable, entertaining content. And then as they grow, deciding where we want to go into news or lifestyle or video content. So certainly China has to be a part of that equation. We're at the very earliest stages of thinking about what that might look like. One thing that certainly is a challenge for us is that we're we're used to building an audience on Facebook and Twitter primarily, and that's not an option in China. But there are very powerful social networks that exist here, and I think the basic concept that people will like to share content with one another as a means of interacting with their friends or expressing themselves is certainly true here as well. We just need to figure out how Buzzfeed might fit into that equation. I think the thing that has been most interesting for me so far is that the social infrastructure, the rails that are being built on the social side in China seem to me very advanced. A platform like WeChat is very unusual to see for an American because it does so many things, but does them very well. And it seems to me that media companies can also interact with WeChat in a wonderful way. There are others, QQ, Weibo, that are massively popular and have features that seem advanced when compared to their American counterparts. So that I found very exciting. I think you're right, there is this disaggregation. At the same time, there's not so much happening in the news space of creators, of media companies who are creating content for those platforms. So for us, that seems exciting. That seems like an opportunity. I definitely feel like we can learn a lot about the direction that the web and digital media is heading, namely to devices, to mobile consumption from what's going on in China right now.